Hi, I'm Kat Kosho. Today we're here at my house. We're going to talk about some spray foam insulation, the DAP Touch-In Foam. And today we have Mike to talk about it with us.
Thank you.
I was really impressed using this product. At first I was a little intimidated, but now that I've done a couple of the skylight walls in my house, I'm very much a fan. It was a fun process. It was easy to use, and I was hoping maybe you could talk about the popularity of the product and what you hear from customers.
Well, thanks, Kat. That's a great question because what DAP has done has really engineered this product to be easy to use and take the fear out of it or apprehension of using the product. We do have some basic rules that we have covered, and I'll cover now, on setting the product up. But once you're set up and you're ready to go, it is a very easy process.
I use this product in our skylight wells. That's not, as I imagine, not the most common use for this product. I'm thinking more like in a wall cavity with the flash and bat method. Would you maybe touch on the two different ways to do that?
Great question. There's many ways to use this product. One of the obvious ones that you just did, using it as an insulation. And as long as you layer the product, that's a great use of this product to get into the nooks and crannies of the job. If it's a large-scale insulation product, you may be better off to contact a insulation specialist and have them come in and spray the attic or whatnot. This is great for the little jobs and the nooks and crannies, like I said before. If you've ever done a remodeling project and you've taken off the old insulation and you look at it and it's all full of dust and dirt, and you might ask yourself, where'd that come from? That came from the air coming through your walls. And so what this does, it acts as an air barrier, being a closed cell foam. So if you go around the area with the 2x4s or the wall joists come together and go around there and picture frame it, that's going to block that air from coming in, because all the insulation is doing is that part is acting as a filter if it's not an air barrier. By putting the air barrier, you're going to get a better insulation, you're going to get controlled airflow through your house by blocking it from the walls, and it's just going to add to the job.
Another advantage of the foam opposed to other methods of insulation would be houses aren't exactly cookie cutter and you have some unique spots.
You demonstrated that with your particular insulation project on these skylights. There are areas that just you cannot put insulation on, little nooks and crannies, or maybe it's a masonry brick wall, or maybe metal or something like that of dissimilar products. This is a way to get into those and adhere to them without a lot of fuss, and that's a great use of that product.
Are there any areas you want to avoid with the foam, or any areas you should not apply it to?
High heat, open flame. Want to keep it away from that. You can go over wiring, plumbing, and things like that are buried into the wall. You want to avoid really close spots, tight spots where you're filling the whole thing up, because the material does expand, and we don't want to put undue expansion in that. If you're layering the material up, you'll avoid a lot of that.
So there's two components, one in each of the cans. What do you need to be aware of? What kind of implications does that mean for the product?
The neat thing about these two-component foams is that one won't work without the other, and they both have to come together to cure and set off and create the reaction or the expansion of the foam. So once we have everything ready, it's important to continue on with the job with no lunch breaks, no coffee breaks. It doesn't take a lot of time, depending on the temperature, where that nozzle can stop flowing. So at that point, you take the nozzle off, you take our little spray cleaner, wipe that area down, and put another nozzle on and continue on.
One important thing we found, and one of our biggest struggles when using the product, was the temperature of the surface, of the environment, of the product. Obviously, we are just putting in insulation, so it's not the recommended 60, at least 60 degrees in here. We ended up keeping it in a cabinet with insulation. We stored it at a different home that has heating to keep the chemicals right, and then transported it over here, kept it in an insulated cabinet with a heater on it. That was maybe our biggest struggle, and I imagine that's probably a big concern for some people.
Depending on the area that you live in the United States, it's not a big issue down in Arizona, but it certainly is up here with our climate. And necessity is the mother of invention. And you guys did a great job of paying attention to making sure that product was at the right gunning temperature. So the outside ambient temperature is important, but not as important or as critical as getting that material up to 70 degrees in that environment before you apply it. And it could be keeping the product at home, keeping it inside your truck, any different ways to maintain that temperature. The other critical thing you folks did that was great is you shook the material. Just like a can of spray paint, it's not going to flow unless you're shaking that product. So you can rock it back and forth, do what you need to do before spraying to mix those products together and get the optimal mix with the products as you gun the material.
We used a temperature gun on the product and then also on the surface. Is that kind of what you would recommend for customers?
That's a good idea. It is helpful. Is it mandatory? No, it measures the outside of the container, not necessarily inside the container, but it's good to have as a guideline, and that gave a great indication that, hey, this is warm and I'm ready to go.
What are some of the common mistakes that you see when people are applying the product?
When you have the gun up and you're pulling the trigger, ease into the trigger. If you grab it, a lot of spray is going to come out real fast, and you may not be prepared for that. So ease into the trigger as you're moving the gun will go a long way in controlling the spray and putting a nice equal amount of spray on the job.
Are there any signs to look out for as you're applying the spray foam to make sure you're doing it accurately, or like a good checkpoint or a rule of thumb?
We're looking for a consistent product coming out. And if you're spraying and let's say it's watery or it's liquidy, maybe one of the nozzles has become plugged up in the gun and you're not getting an equal amount of both parts. On the opposite end of that, let's say it's like all popcorny and all fluffy, like seafoam, I guess would be a term, then you're not maybe getting the catalyst on the other side. That's a good time to stop, take the nozzle off, clean that gun out, and spray into the can without the nozzle, making sure it's all coming out nice and evenly, and put another nozzle on and continue on.
So from my experience, we had skylight wells, 6 of them, multiple areas of the house, stopped and started many times, which meant we used a lot of nozzles, probably more than the average person, but I imagine that it would be helpful to have extra nozzles or hoses on hand.
Yes, you had a lot of different areas that you were addressing. If it were a wide open area, the nozzle exchange would be minimal. But in your particular case, you were moving from area to area, so you used more nozzles than a person normally would. But, and also the hose, reaching up in the areas like the attics or like skylights, a longer hose sometimes can become necessary to customize that material to your project. So extra nozzles, extra hoses can be obtained at Dumb Lumber to customize that particular job.
I also imagine that those extra nozzles and extra hoses would be helpful if you don't use all of the product and you're saving it to use at a different project.
Absolutely. The material itself has a shelf life of 1 year from the date of manufacture. So that's the shelf life sitting on the shelf. Once you've opened and used the product, there's a procedure of shutting it down and reusing it up to 30 days after the original application.
So from our experience, we are in a wet climate in the middle of winter. It's a cold house with no heating. We tried to reuse the product, but there was condensation built up in the hose. So we ended up having to switch the hose, and then the product worked just fine.
You're in kind of a special, you're not outside, but you're close. And so leaving the material in the all hooked up is a good idea on warmer temperatures. But you're right, when it's cold, it can have condensation within those hoses to cause things to kind of clog up a little bit. And that would be a good thing to remember. And it might be a good idea to buy an extra hose. If this is in cold weather situations, you're going to let the product set.
So otherwise, if it was the middle of summer, we would have been fine with leaving the hose attached.
Perfect. It loves warm climates, but you can, with adjustment, use it in cold climates as well.
I heard that there's some new regulations coming up into the state of Washington. Could you elaborate on those?
So yes, recently there's been some legislation in the state of Washington changing the VOC components or requirements on all spray products. And DAP is way ahead of that, and our new products coming out January 1, 21 will have all low VOCs to comply with those rules. So what that means is that the products you've got now are totally fine until those run out, and we are replacing those with the new low VOC components.
I just want to thank you for coming and talking about the product and all of your advice as we were going through the product.
You've asked me some great questions today, and I'd like to come back with a question for you. Interacting with a customer or maybe a contractor, do it yourself, whatever, and they're somewhat apprehensive. I'm not sure I can do this. It looks complicated. What would be your response?
Let's see. My response would be, that was me. I was you. I was apprehensive. I would first direct them to read the FAQs. Once I read those, there's some really helpful videos too with the DVD. I would tell them though, as soon as you start spraying, as long as you ease into the pressure of the gun, it is so fun and so worth it.
Great answer. Thank you.